I know you think you hear an American accent, and so you think, well, she's going to tell us everything about her life. But let me reassure you that I've been in the UK for 23 years. I'm going to do my best, not to kind of issue a rejoinder to everything that Christian has said. And what I wanted to do in my 5 minutes is not to share my feelings with you, because I'm not able to do that as an analyst, but to help give a way of thinking about the year ahead. And this is what I do in boardrooms and C-suites and at investor conferences around the world. But I will say that the themes that have been introduced are really central to this. And it's the idea of whether we think the world is getting better or worse. And I'm working on this now in my forthcoming book, because I realized as a Generation X person that people of my generation who saw the Berlin Wall fall, and in my case went to live in Eastern Europe and worked on democracy and was very involved in the kind of the optimistic scenario that followed those very transformational and also events of huge volatility. The expectation was that the world was heading somewhere that was better for everyone. And so, picking up on themes that have been mentioned, what ends up happening in boardrooms is actually a lot of group therapy and counseling. And I've realized, if I can share what my professional epiphany was, as a long-standing Russia watcher and someone who talks to investors about things that can go wrong, in January of 2022, I was talking to a large number of leaders, won't name names, about the fact that there were 120,000 Russian troops mobilized on the Ukrainian border with Belarus. And I said, there's a material risk of a Russian invasion. And the point here is this. Every single leader I spoke to said one of two things, or both things. They said, that won't happen. It would be bad for the Russian economy. Or they said, he's doing it to spike oil prices, which would be good for the Russian economy. So in other words, they were assessing geopolitical risk through their own prism and their own experience, which is that people don't do things that undermine their economic outcomes or their personal commercial prospects. This is wrong. And this has been the big wake-up call of 2025. Geopolitics isn't news, so that's the good news, if you don't like reading the news because it brings you down. However, it is about power, and power dynamics are what is changing. In our own research on the Geopolitics Supercycle, we established that between 2010, which is the second half of the global financial crisis, and the end of 2024, which is before you-know-who returned to the White House, geopolitical risks tripled. Now, there aren't very many databases that can establish this. I will get to the optimistic point if you'll bear with me. But before you can be optimistic, you've got to understand what the trend is. And if you are, as I am, a reader and a fan of Hans Rosling and factfulness, you'll appreciate that most of us carry in our minds stereotypes, frankly, views that are about 20 years out of date. And they make us feel better. But here's the problem. For all of those board leaders, business leaders, investors, and other clients that I talk to who say, we're optimists, we want to hear about opportunity. Risk and opportunity are two sides of the same coin. So what do? We need to update what I call our PQ, our political quotient, and we need to do what Madeleine Albright called becoming a pragmatic optimist. Now, I had a chance to interview her twice on stage. She is and is my hero, and I think that her life experience as a war refugee from Czechoslovakia who came via Serbia eventually to the UK before becoming the first female US Secretary of State is a lesson in pragmatic optimism. The trouble is, if you haven't experienced personal setbacks or kind of being in the way of global forces, this feels like a personal tragedy. But bear with me. We're going to raise our PQ, and we're going to start thinking more broadly about the world that we're in. So how many people, by a show of hands, think the world is better now than it's ever been? which will be followed by worse than it's ever been. Better now than it's ever been. It's very optimistic for a British audience. We have a lot of foreigners here. How many people think it's worse than it's ever been? Oh, you're just saying that because I told you not to. But let me just tell you that the most pessimistic audience I've ever spoken to was a group of Norwegian sustainability entrepreneurs. One of the most equal countries in the world, where they've got the social safety net right, and these people were personally prospering. They had flown in on private jets, and they were contributing to solving global problems, right? They were sustainability entrepreneurs coming up with amazing solutions. They thought the world was worse than it's ever been by a huge majority. By contrast, in January of this year, I was in South Africa. 2 cities, big global investor conferences, incredibly optimistic. What does this tell us? This is the point. That our expectations are off, right? It tells us also a little something about momentum, that we feel better when we feel that things are getting better. But economists like to tell us, and I'm a political scientist, so we don't like economists, that happiness is expectations minus reality. If we want to be happier, we need to adjust our expectations. If we want to be prosperous, we do need to upgrade our PQ, because geostrategy is now cutting across all business areas. And as humans, we also need to embrace change, because we're not going backwards, right? There's no such thing. It's not possible. So pragmatic optimism, raising your PQ, and finding that balance between being aware of current affairs and the humor that Christian shared with us, which is one of the reasons why I love living in this country. You will always get a laugh line in the UK if you make fun of politicians. This is not true in today's America. It's an occupational hazard. And with that, I will step down from this very precarious podium, if you're wearing Dolce & Gabbana heels. And,